Hello everyone. So I wanted to watch the cricket today, and I wanted to watch it yesterday. Yesterday was completely washed out. Today is washed out so far. It's not even really raining in Sydney. I think it's drizzling a little bit here and there, but it's just like, oh, they can't play because of wet outfield, they can't play because it's just recently rained and so forth. And it's really quite annoying because, you have 5 days, you used to even have rest days, and then they could have that reserve day, whatever. And you still don't get matches in, and this really puts cricket in a really bad light. There are a few things that are really bad about cricket, and this is one of them. Another one, of course, is when teams just go for the draw and don't even try to win. This is one of the really bad bits about cricket, and just makes people think, well, why bother? And in explanation for that, there are two things that they used to do that they stopped doing. So one is that in test matches, they didn't used to have a time limit. You just play until it's finished. And, you'd have what we now call timeless tests. So you play 2 innings each, there'd be no worries about trying to declare. You just finish it. However many runs you get in your innings, the other team has to get that many. You just try to get as many runs as possible. And in that way, you'd never have a draw. And that all stopped when, in one match, they kept going. I think it was to the 12th day, and one team had to go back on their boat. They couldn't get back otherwise. There were no other ships departing for, I think, another month. So they stopped doing that, and they reduced it to 5 days. So the reason they picked 5 days was because the average length of a match was about 4. So they thought, well, we're giving an extra day just to be sure. And we do have matches that end in 2 days. Well, that's pretty rare. 3 days certainly happens. 4 days is quite common. So going to the 5th day is reasonably rare. And so your average match finishes in about 4 days. And that's around about how long it takes. So we therefore have effectively 1 day up our sleeves. And if you look at the matches in this series, Australia and South Africa, there were 3 days, 2 days, and then this one. So far we've had barely, well, I don't think we're even up to the amount of overs for a day and a half. First day rained so much they only got through, I think it was 47 overs, just like half a day worth. And then the second day they didn't even get through a full day's over. Got through 88, I think it was, or 87. That was in spite of having extra time to make up, and it didn't rain at all on the second day. And then no play on the third, and so far none on the fourth. So we're still in the first innings. It looks like there's not going to be a result. It'd be very surprising if they could manage to get one. And it's really annoying. And then you have bad light as well. They stop at bad light. So why do they have that? And I think the answer to why they have these things is to look at what happened beforehand when they didn't used to have it. So originally you just play forever, but they always came off for bad light. They didn't always have light meters, but they'd always say, oh, look, it's too dangerous, we'll just come back in. And they'd always come off for rain, because when it's raining, it's unfairly good for the bowlers. Because you're bowling in the rain, the batsman can't see a thing. It's not fair. Now, other sports keep playing in the rain. I mean, football plays in the rain, soccer does, just about every sport that plays outdoors plays in the rain. But the difference is because you have a batting time and a bowling time, and when it's raining, it is so much easier for the bowling side that it's not worth bothering with. And it also damages the pitch. So if you have a pitch that's being rained on, it damages it, and it becomes a lot easier to bowl on later on. So even if they went off while it was actually raining and came back on soon afterwards, you'd have what you call a wet pitch. And they used to play on wet pitches, and when they did, teams would be out very, very cheaply, and it would take a number of hours before it would be safe to play. So nowadays they cover the pitch, but not only do they cover the pitch, but then it can be a number of hours before they come back out to play. Now you might think, all right, covering the pitch, that should put an end to it, and then they should just play, but with the wet outfield and all that, it can be unfairly bad for the batting team. So all of this is to make it fair to the batting team, but it's unfair on the spectators. So that becomes a bit of an issue. So do you want to make it unfair on the the players or unfair on the spectators. And they're two competing issues. So, a lot of players actually would think, well, let's go back to the time when we used to have uncovered pitches at the least. Okay, we can go off when it's actually raining. So in this match, the one that we're playing right now in Sydney, if they'd gone off just when it was raining and not when it was a wet pitch, and they hadn't covered the pitches, and sure, they'd still go off a bad light, we would have had a lot. We would have had a lot more overs bowled in the first day. So we probably would have had, instead of 47 overs, we might have had about 65. But Australia would have lost some wickets. So Australia's currently 4 for 475. We would think, well, you probably would have got another 20 overs in when it was not raining, but the ground was wet and all that sort of stuff. And in those, 20 overs or so, Australia might have lost all the rest of their wickets for a very small target, very small amount of runs. And I mean, we finished day one, I think it was 2 for 130. We might have been all out for 180. And instead of now being 4 for 475. So we would have been all out for 180. And then day two, the wet pitch would have gone. South Africa could have batted. They might have got 280 or so. South Africa would be winning. And then because it's raining now today, now that we could have had, South Africa could have declared and then had to put Australia in on the wet outfield we would have had yesterday. Australia might have lost 4 or 5 wickets, might have just barely got ahead, and then today we'd be batting with that wet outfield. Australia might be all out for 200 or so, setting South Africa about 100 to win. And then South Africa would be hoping that the outfield is not too wet. And yeah, you'd have a contest. The match would be finishing, but it'd be one in which South Africa would be a chance of winning, where fairly they wouldn't be, because fairly, take out those wet conditions situations and play only when it's dry and fair, South Africa loses badly. So the wet conditions themselves mean that different teams get to win or lose based on what is essentially luck. And also you'd have, if you think it's going to rain, you'd have people who are wet pitch specialists, and especially there was wet pitch specialist bowlers. And there were a lot of spin bowlers who were very good at wet pitches. And they even said that when they stopped playing on wet pitches, spin bowling art might end. But Derek Underwood was one of the last wet pitch specialists, because England kept having uncovered pitches up into the 1960s and I think even early 1970s. Other parts of the world stopped doing that in the 1950s. So, but then that all stopped. And spin bowlers still found a way to work things out, but with dry pitches and not wet pitches. And yet there were fast bowlers who were wet pitch specialists, and there were some batsmen who were good at batting on wet pitches. So there's a certain way to bat. It doesn't bounce as much and does unpredictable things. So you just basically block a lot. And we've got to remember Don Bradman, with his average of 99.94, did that on wet pitches as well. And he only averaged 60 on wet pitches. So he did nowhere near as well on wet pitches. And, they had bodyline. He averaged 51 when they had bodyline, where they bowled bounces every ball. And he still averaged 50. So you've got to realise that without all that sort of stuff, he'd be averaging a lot more, and who knows how much more. But so should they go back to wet pitches? I think they should. To be honest, I think they should. Should they go back to timeless tests? I think they should probably have reserve days for when it rains, possibly up to 2 reserve days. And I think so. If it rains, you use that reserve day to add on to the end. And I think that's a fair way to do it. They used to have rest days, so they'd play 3 days, have a rest day, and then play days after that. And I think reserve days are a fair way to do it. I don't think they should have timeless tests. Most matches finish in 5 days. The vast majority of them do. And, if you're going for a draw, you're going for a draw. Yeah, but I do think that we should be playing on wet pitches. And No, not when it's raining, but when it's a wet pitch. And I know that makes it dangerous and all this sort of stuff. But there were tactics, and a lot of people miss those tactics. You know, a lot of the players that would play under wet pitches loved it. So I think that's what they should do. They should play on wet pitches. And yes, it might cost Australia this match, but might not. That would have made it very interesting for spectators. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye now.